Well, so there were some interesting comments from Peter Wright over the weekend where he, in response to some comments that Chris Mason had made in commentary, stated that he thought that Chris Dobie should have been selected for the Premier League ahead of Peter Wright. What all did you make of Peter Wright's comments?
Yeah, it was certainly interesting to see those comments, and they were made after that match against Krzysztof Ratajski on Saturday in the second round. It was Peter's first game of the tournament, and as you say, was mentioning some of the comments that Chris Mason had made on the ITV broadcast about that Chris Dobie should have been in the Premier League. And Peter Wright wasn't very happy with it, was he? But on Twitter later that day, he did post that I'd like to apologise to Chris Dobie. It wasn't meant to be a dig at him personally. It was about being picked for the Premier League and the criticism about being picked over Chris Dobie. Not that I know if it was a choice between us or not. And whilst I was at the Rileys on Saturday, they had the big screens everywhere showing the Masters, and caught my eye actually the celebration from Peter Wright at the end of that game with Krzysztof Ratajski. And I thought, what's happened here? Because we very rarely see those kind of animated celebrations from Peter. They're mostly saved for if he's won a particular tournament. You don't usually see them in those early rounds. And shout out to Darts Oracle for this stat as well. They posted it after the opening night of the Premier League last week, but it's a stat that still rings true after the Masters at the weekend, and that is since winning the European Championship in October, Peter Wright has averaged below 85 in half of his matches on TV. And looking at the straight shootout, as people are calling it, between Peter Wright and Chris Dobie for the Premier League. We had Chris Dobie on the show last week as one of our guests, and I think the general feeling from that conversation was that it was his quarter-final at Ali Pali against Rob Cross. That was the unofficial Premier League playoff to get in, because Peter Wright winning that European Championship, the way he did it, the high 90s averages all the way through for the most part that weekend, that's what got him that Premier League call-up. Because if we're going off form on the tour alone for the last 12 months, then it's hard to make an argument that Peter Wright should be in, because he's not been as consistent as other players, and that includes Chris Dobie in that as well. But that major title, coupled with his stature in the game, and that's more than enough credit, I think, in the bank to include him, despite him being well out of form for most of last year and the start of this year as well. But I did say before this Premier League started that I did fear for Peter Wright. Was it the right decision for him to play in it? Could he have perhaps ducked it, spent more time at home, working on his game, being outside of that cauldron that is the Premier League for 4 months on end? Because these days it's not like it was before. If you have a bad start to the Premier League, after 9 weeks, you could be eliminated and you could have that break from it. But these days, you are going to be there for the duration. You're going to be playing for those 16 weeks. And I think the comments he made, they do sound like they're from a player who is under that pressure to perform. And he's not at peace with where his game is right now. And when you're in the firing line every week, as he is going to be now with the Premier League and other events that are going to be going on, there is no hiding place. So, yeah, I think he's in a tough spot right now, that's for sure. And those comments, like I say, I think they're coming from a player that is under the cosh at the moment.
Exactly. I think it's just frustration at this point. And I mean, Peter Wright has faced adversity a lot in his career, both, the adversity to try to cross that line that was right in front of him on many occasions, but not able to times when it looked like his career was stagnating or backtracking. And each time it may have taken some time, but he lifted his game. He found whatever it was that he was missing and became a better player, eventually becoming world champion, eventually becoming world champion again, and becoming world number one. And maybe it did seem like he was finding it again after nearly 2 years of inconsistency and at times really poor play. It was looking like he won the European Championship. Maybe things were getting back on the right track. But as you said, this great tweet from Darts Oracle, half the matches since then being under an 85 average. And I said at the time of the European Championships that it looked, at least to me, more likely, and actually I said this as well about James Wade, but I said it for Peter Wright as well, that this was more of a Wes Newton at the 2014 Players' Championship final making a semifinal out of nowhere than a resurrection. But we didn't know for sure because Peter Wright had been in not necessarily as prolonged and as deep of a slump as he had been heading into the European Championship, but certainly one's on a lesser scale on multiple occasions and found his way out of it. But at some point, you're not going to be able to climb back. And I wonder if this is just the beginning, or not the beginning, the continuation of a very steep decline for Peter Wright. He does not look like a top 16 player most of the time. He doesn't look like a top 32 player most of the time. He had some good moments against Krzysztof Ratajski in his first match. He's had some other performances where he's played all right, but he's had, well, half the time performances where he couldn't even average 85. And that is the scary part. Even when he's going against players who are likewise out of form, it's no guarantee that he's going to be competitive. I think the comments were frustration. I think he is scared about where his game is, and he doesn't know what to do to get it in the right place. As far as whether he should have been selected for the Premier League, we've talked about that. A lot of people have talked about that. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. What we're talking about is his comments about it, and I think it's a sign of where his head is, just like you said, and it's even more so than his performances. The fact that he's commenting on like that should be the biggest worry.